Hello and welcome to the University of Law podcast and to episode 2 in our new series, AI in Conversation. I'm Dr. Paul Sant, Head of Computer Science at the University of Law. And in this series, we are talking to various guests in the technology sector, learning more about their journeys and how AI is challenging the landscape in their industry. Today, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Henry Warner, Senior Legal Engineer at AI-enabled contract automation platform tech company Juro. Hi, Henry. Welcome.
Hi.
And thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Okay, so Henry, we're going to explore the fantastic area of AI and how it's being utilized, especially within the area of legal technology. But before we get there, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what makes you you.
I'm currently working as a senior legal engineer at Juro, but maybe to sort of step back a little bit. I was born in Hong Kong.
Wow.
I grew up, I traveled around the world quite a bit, ended up doing most of my education in the UK, and studied philosophy as an undergraduate. And then I was very fortunate to study law as a master's student at the University of Law. Yeah, throughout my kind of education, I was always very interested in technology, always following the kind of latest trends of, you know, what products were being released and the sort of technologies that were being used. I was really interested in blockchain technology throughout my kind of the latter years of my undergraduate education and also throughout my master's. And I ended up writing a dissertation on contracts and blockchain, essentially smart contracts. And that got me interested in contract automation. And I ended up, through my research, actually coming across Juro as a company. And then when I left the University of Law, I graduated from the University of Law, after a little bit of time, I actually managed to secure a job at Juro it was originally a business development representative, so essentially in the sales team. Yeah, and then I pivoted into legal engineering, which is what I'm doing now. And yeah, so that's kind of a bit of a background about me. But happy to dig into any of those in a bit more detail with you.
Fantastic, Henry. That's really, really interesting. And I guess one thing for me, if you could tell our viewers and audience a little bit more, what was it that inspired you to think about combining technology or computing and law together as a career option?
Yeah, so I think it's always been a very natural pairing for me, which might not necessarily be the case for everyone, but I've always viewed sort of the tech world and the legal world as fundamentally sort of two areas that are solving for similar issues, similar problems. Maybe to sort of explain what I mean by that, you know, so in my job currently, I work very closely with lawyers who are essentially helping businesses to draft and then commit to contracts. And I mean, if you think of some of the most successful tech platforms or tech solutions that are out there, you think of Amazon. Ultimately, what they're doing is at a kind of very high volume. They're allowing people to kind of collaborate, or eBay from across the world on things in a kind of consistent and predictable way. So I've always seen a lot of overlap between the types of problems that law and technology help us with. They're all essentially social problems. Not all, sorry. There are lots of sort of maybe physical, chemical, biological problems that technology helps us with. But certainly in the area that I'm interested in, I think there's a lot in common between law and technology, and there's certainly a lot that both disciplines,
Fantastic.
if you will, can learn from each other.
Yeah, no, that's really, really true. And if we can take a little step back into the past, and I know a lot of our viewers and audience will be quite interested in thinking about kind of coming from school or college into university. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your journey was in terms of the A-levels that you studied and then progressing through philosophy, and what made you then think about coming to the University of Law to study, and then, of course, the final pivot? Yeah, you already said a little bit about into the job, but how did you kind of navigate that? So starting off with the kind of university application process and what you studied to get you where you went as an undergraduate student.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd love to say that at the age of 16, having just finished my GCSEs, I sort of saw into the depths of the future and thought, I'll be ending up as a senior legal engineer. But to be honest, that's not really what happened. As all, it was just one thing after another, really, and here we are. But I think it's always been a combination of things that I'm good at and enjoy, and sort of when I finished my GCSEs, the things that I was good at and enjoyed were like actually quite sort of STEM related subjects. So I studied maths, further maths, physics, and philosophy at A level. The philosophy was always kind of like the odd one out, if you will. And I think as I progressed through the A levels, I realized that it wasn't the kind of technical working through of, whether it's a mechanics problem in physics or some sort of algebra problem in maths or whatever. It wasn't necessarily that side of things that interested me about this. It was the ideas and the kind of the thinking behind them. So I actually leaned into the philosophy quite a lot. I did philosophy at university, and then sort of as I was an undergraduate, I got more interested in like the world outside of academics. Up until that point, I'd only really been at school. My world was fairly sheltered, and so I started being interested in how I can apply essentially the love of ideas to the real world, and the legal sort of side of things sort of appealed to me for various reasons. It seemed that a lot of areas in life have kind of legal consequences, or at least a legal aspect. So knowing a thing or two about the law, knowing a thing or two about how people apply ideas into kind of a structured way of running society seemed like a good idea. But like all the way through that, because I, sort of been interested in like coding and maths and that sort of thing from kind of fairly not early age. I wasn't sort of sitting down at a computer at the age of 7 or whatever and writing programs. That wasn't kind of my path, but I was always like interested in that sort of thing.
That's really fantastic. And I think that really resonates, I'm sure, with many of our listeners who will be happy to know that, you don't have to know at the age of 14 or 16 exactly what your career path is. There are lots of opportunities. There are lots of different twists and turns. But we turn now to what your day job is today. Would you tell us a little bit more about what the area of legal technology is?
Yeah, so I work for a legal technology vendor. So we have software. We have a software solution, and we provide that to lawyers, to not just lawyers, actually, to a wide range of people to help them with their contracts. And that might be kind of creating contracts, like drafting them. That might be actually agreeing contracts. So like more collaboration side things, like with counterparties, internal collaboration. And then also we do help them at the end of, once those contracts have been executed, we help them understand what contracts they've committed to as an organization, understand where the risk lies within their contract portfolio. And so it's just a wide range of things. And because contracts intersect with pretty much every organization and across lots of different parts of that organization, we also work with people who are kind of leading sales teams, or maybe they're leading a procurement team, or maybe someone who's running a marketing campaign and they need to be involved with lots of influencers or creatives and things like that. So basically any area where there's like a high volume of contracts, we will help with. Yeah. So what I do is I actually help these people kind of learn the technology and get the most out of it. So in many ways, our jobs are probably fairly similar in that I'm kind of teaching people in a professional context how to get the most out of technology, but also increasingly AI. So AI is a big part of what we do at Juro, and it's built into almost all of the workflows that we have in the system. So we kind of position ourselves as an AI native solution, which means that, which means a lot of things, but essentially it means that when you're using our platform, you're getting the most out of kind of the cutting edge AI technologies, and actually helping lawyers, heads of sales, revenue leaders, whatever it is, like helping them get the most out of that tools is what I do on a kind of day-to-day basis.
Fantastic. I mean, that sounds really exciting, but I'm going to ask you, what excites you most about being a Siegel legal engineer and the job that you do?
I think it's the kind of the pace at which I have to learn new technologies, new industries, new things. Really, it's always amazing what our product team comes up with. We've recently sort of released a range of features around kind of data extraction from contracts, and actually the kind of just the scope of what's possible now versus like 5 years ago is just amazing. I mean, like 5 years ago, you'd have to have a specific kind of model that's trained on specific types of contracts, specific data, whereas now you can leverage these large language models to basically extract whatever data you want, and as long as you have good prompting and things like that, you'll actually get fairly accurate results. So just like that pace of innovation, keeping up with it, almost every month I have to kind of learn a new feature, understand the value to different stakeholders and different types of customer in different industries. And we work with organizations ranging from kind of large educational organizations, a little bit like the University of Law, all the way to kind of like government bodies, fast startups, big sort of multinational corporations, like household name type things. So lots of different types of company, and they all want something slightly different. So it's sort of learning that and staying on top of that, which is probably the most exciting. I mean, there's other exciting things, like we just got back from a trip to Croatia, which was pretty fun. But I think that actually it's the continuous learning, which is the kind of the motivator and the most interesting part for me.
Fantastic. So fast-paced, dynamic, and always something new, I guess, if I summarize what you really enjoy. So turning now to what it's like to work in legal tech, could you tell us a little bit about what your typical, if there is any such thing, day might look like?
I think maybe the typical week might be easier to give you, just as, I'll probably spend, a good chunk of time actually on calls not too dissimilar from this one with our clients, with our customers. So those might range from kind of information gathering calls where I'm learning about their organization, what they want, their value areas, things like that. But it also might be kind of like more information, the opposite of gathering, just giving away, I guess, where we're kind of doing like active training, providing solutions, helping them understand what's possible. And then when I'm not doing that, it's a lot of kind of, well, actually sort of either implement, like actually delivering on the solutions that we've sort of discussed. So that might be configuring a workflow. So, maybe let's go back to the example we had earlier. You have a sort of a marketing team who are working with the legal team. They want to send out a large number of like influencer contracts for maybe a big event they have coming up. Actually creating a workflow, creating an automation that's going to be able to do that in a way that's sort of not going to take up too much time. So actually deploying those sorts of solutions. Maybe there's some sort of integration with some other system that needs to be configured. So there's a fair amount of time that's spent on that. And then because it's we're not sort of an enormous organization with highly specialized people at this stage, I also get to kind of wear a few other hats, if you will, and sort of get involved in other projects. So I'm involved in a series of webinars we're doing on AI, and specifically our AI functionality. So I'm working quite closely with our marketing team on that. So that's lots of fun. Every now and then I get to go to a conference. That's always fun, kind of getting in person and meeting the other members of the legal tech community and also the in-house community that we are very closely aligned with. So yeah, it can be quite range, but I'd say the bulk of the week is spent on calls with customers and helping them actually implement the solutions that they've paid for.
Fantastic. So communication, problem solving, and putting things where they need to be in terms of building and implementing seems to be boiled down to what a lot of your typical working week might look like. So very exciting, very varied, and lots of different skills that are needed as part of that. So turning now, if you had one piece of advice for someone who's interested in finding out more about legal technology, what it is, the careers that are available, what would it be?
I think if I had one piece of advice, it would just be to to put yourself out there a bit. If I kind of maybe and give an example from my own kind of career journey, if you will. So how did I come across Juro? How did I actually end up with a job at Juro? So it was during the research that I was doing for my dissertation that I came across something that's called Law Tech UK. So they run a series of conferences, among other things. And Richard, the actual founder of Juro, was presenting Juro at this conference, and I thought, wow, that's cool. And a little bit later, I followed them on LinkedIn and that sort of thing. A little bit later, I saw that they were hiring for a role I'd never heard of. They were hiring for the business development representative role, and it actually turned out that someone I knew from school had also been a business development representative at Juro. And so I reached out to him and sort of asked him, okay, like, what does this role do? What does it mean? Like, would I be any good at it? That sort of thing. And actually, just through that conversation, I was like, oh, okay, well, actually, it'd be a really interesting role for me. I'd learn loads of things that I just hadn't previously done, and I'd be in a space that I really want to be in. So I think combination of just sort of making that leap, and it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who you went to school with. You can reach out to people over LinkedIn, like ask questions, try to go to industry events, meet people. Just put yourself out there a bit, and also don't kind of be too, especially in the legal tech world, things are moving very quickly. You will develop very quickly once you get into a role. So if it's not like the perfect role, or like maybe if you hear this and you think, oh, legal engineering sounds really cool, you might not find a legal engineer role, but there are other roles which will develop you as a professional. And will be just as fulfilling, and you may find yourself pivoting into legal engineering later on. Also, you might find yourself discovering a whole range of other things that you never knew existed, and kind of discarding that dream, along with other dreams that you may have had. I used to want to be an astronaut, so things change. So I definitely recommend kind of taking the leap and finding things that are not exactly what was in the plan when you were 16.
Yeah, fantastic. Exactly. 16, you're quite young and quite a young age in terms of doing that. So obviously there's things to think about. There's things that can change, careers can change, and the way that people have approached searching for jobs and experience has also changed. So I think that is a really, really important aspect of the work. Okay, so if we turn now just to talk about getting a job in legal technology, are there any skills or particular degrees or subjects that companies look for when they're trying to recruit people looking to work in legal technology?
Yeah, so I think legal technology is a very interesting job market because it spans, well, the legal world, but also the technology world, which may seem like sort of an obvious thing to say, but that has certain implications. So in the legal world, there are obviously kind of qualifications you require to be a lawyer, like especially a qualified lawyer. But in the technology world, things are a little bit more fluid, I would say. So I have colleagues, and I've had colleagues in the past who have, so I came into the role with a master's degree, but I have colleagues who maybe didn't go to university. I have colleagues who are kind of much older than me, much younger than me. So a very varied backgrounds. And I think people come to technology from all sorts of walks of life and all sorts of academic backgrounds and professional backgrounds. That's not necessarily the case in legal. I think there's more of a kind of formal or formalized route into legal roles. And so like legal tech, it's a weird intersection. So you do have people who kind of come from a legal background, they have legal education, such as myself, but you also have people who kind of come maybe just from the more sort of tech side of things. So maybe they have previous experience in a tech company. Maybe they did that straight out of school without going to university. So you do get a kind of mix. So what I'd say is actually, because of that, you can actually come to legal technology from all sorts of walks of life. And I think it's much more important that the skills are kind of developed and you have evidence of certain skills. So I think really important skills are going to be actually the ability to interact with customers, so like real people, and that might be customer facing experience outside of the technology world. So for example, one of my colleagues worked in McDonald's when she was younger, and so had a kind of customer facing role there. So I think anything that kind of can demonstrate that your ability to be in front of people, and maybe at university there are opportunities to kind of develop that in kind of presentation work and things like that. So those sorts of skills are really valuable. I think general problem solving is also good to have, and something that employers will look for. I think it can sometimes be difficult to demonstrate that in a CV. So be prepared to kind of give examples of problems that you've solved in an interview context. And yeah, so I think those two things are probably the kind of key skills. And then just probably an interest, like an actual passion for legal tech, which can be demonstrated in all sorts of ways. But I think putting yourself out there and getting involved in the community is definitely the best way to kind of demonstrate that. And people will know if you're kind of interested, because you'll be going to events and kind of reaching out to people, and it'll be clear from your just exposure. There's lots of things that you can read as well, and listen to, like this sort of thing is sort of part of that. It's a few different things. It also depends quite a lot on the actual role that you're applying to. So
I think, communication, teamwork, problem solving are three core skills. And of course, there may be some other skills. And I think that the key thing to say is that they don't necessarily have to come directly from, a legal technology or even legal or tech perspective. You gave a great example of there, somebody who'd worked in kind of the hospitality industry and developed customer-facing skills that are very, very valuable when you're talking to clients day in, day out, and often really important to be able to explain some of the technical piece of things in a language that they can understand, and demonstrating to it, I think is really important. So if people are interested in coming along to some of these events, what might be a great opportunity or a great vehicle for them to be able to find those things? Is it LinkedIn? Is it company websites, or is it a combination of lots of different things?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn is probably the best bet. It can be difficult because there's no sort of centralized place where everything is sort of gathered for people. University careers departments often have resources. So actually at Juro, I help out with our own student outreach program. And we've worked together, Paul, but like we have links to university careers departments. So I imagine other organizations also try and foster those links. So if you want a kind of a nexus of sort of those sorts of organizations, then I think the careers department and people within universities who are kind of connected with the kind of professional side of things are probably a good place to start, just like asking for recommendations. But I think also just broadly on LinkedIn, if you follow people who are kind of posting about opportunities and hosting kind of events and that sort of thing, then it kind of snowballs. So they'll probably interact with other people, and you can kind of see that and follow them as well, and reach out to someone, that sort of thing. I think it can be very powerful, the kind of social network side of things, particularly LinkedIn for this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I know Legal Cheek is also quite a big community, so maybe that's another opportunity to be able to get slightly more centralized information. But yes, you're right. There might be lots of different things, and LinkedIn is certainly a good starting point. Okay, so having looked and explored the area of legal tech in some detail, what's your own perspective in terms of the next big thing in the legal tech world?
I mean, I think AI is all the rage at the moment, and for like good reasons. The kind of scope of what's possible, I think, is only just being explored commercially. I think there's going to be lots of exciting things coming. It's always very difficult to say exactly what it will be, but I think if you kind of and actually this is probably helpful for people who are trying to kind of get into a tech related space. If you kind of look at the underlying technology, which in this case is what's driving most of this, is these large language models, and kind of look at what they do, and essentially they take at the moment a text input and give you a text output, and fortunately that text output seems to kind of bear some semblance to the kind of thought process that a human would do if they had that same input. what does that mean? Well, it means that you can give it a document and it can tell you sort of key information about that document. And I think that's the sort of first wave of use cases. But I think as you get into the second, third sort of wave of use cases, I think a big thing that we're seeing and also like actually at Juro we're actively developing is these sort of agents, so AI-based agents that will actually just take a task and do it autonomously for a user. So that's really quite different to sort of more traditional software as service tech platforms where it's the user who kind of does something on the platform. Maybe it's a workflow that they're going through or a task that they're doing. But now things that are potentially not user generated or not user triggered will kind of have these autonomous workflows happening independently. So that's quite exciting. And that's really shifts the kind of focus of the user. So like now a legal user is not necessarily the person doing the work, but maybe there's sort of someone who oversees the work that's being done, which is, I think, exciting, but also a little bit scary at the same time. So I think that will be a pretty big shift. And in and of itself, that's pretty huge. But I think in addition to that, you're also going to see different sorts of interfaces. Like tech platforms historically have been there's lots of buttons and like maybe drop down menus and things as options. Like you think about Microsoft Word, right? You have all the stuff at the top, all these different options. So I think there's definitely a possibility that these sort of interface, at least from the human to computer interface, will be transformed and maybe made a lot more kind of natural. So you kind of just give natural language commands, and that's just how it happens. You're asking for kind of value, not sort of specific tasks to be done. So you say, okay, like, present me the report that I'm going to need for X, Y, and Z, and it just does it for you rather than you having to kind of go in there and choose the font and the headings and that sort of thing and type out the report based on another document. So I think interfaces are kind of going to shift quite a lot. So that's another thing. And then I think AI like digital autonomy in and of itself could have pretty incredible impact on the world, both from a commercial sense, but also like a legal sense. I think you think about if you have these sort of autonomous legal digital agents doing things, what are the kind of legal impacts of that? Who's responsible, all that sort of thing. So I think there's lots for people who are interested in technology to be excited about. There's lots for people who are just users of this technology to be excited about. I think there's also lots for kind of budding lawyers to be excited about and get their teeth stuck into, because there's going to be lots of sort of questions cropping up that will need smart people to solve.
That's a great insight, Henry. Thank you for that. And I guess, areas such as explainable AI. So how did you come up with the answer? Give me a little bit of thinking about your thought process so I can check that it was correct, perhaps in these autonomous agents. And responsible AI will underpin some of these things. So I think there may be some opportunities within that space too, or certainly for some input into that space, given the implications of the direction of travel that we're seeing. Okay, so thank you for joining us today, Henry, and to our listeners for tuning in. Please do follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to get notified when a new episode in this series is launched. And if you'd like to learn more about computer science courses and opportunities available, or any of our other courses at the University of Law, please visit our website, law.ac.uk. Thanks again, Henry, and goodbye.